to note. Number one, the bottom of the shoe. In many cultures throughout the world, showing someone the bottom of your shoe is the most profane thing you can do. Yeah? It's an insult, it's vile. That's why sometimes people take their shoes off before they enter homes. That's why throwing a shoe or pounding a shoe on the table at the UN, all of that is considered to be so heinous. But even if it's not a total cultural insult, please check for sale signs, gum, holes. And also, guys, you must, repeat, must, wear over-the-calf socks. The hairy leg gap, not attractive. Male or female, never attractive. I had to tell someone running for governor that once. Oh, but they're so uncomfortable, those socks. Suck it up. You're going to be on TV for half an hour, right? Okay, what else? The one gesture that I hate is the pointed finger. Yes, open hand, you'll notice when I call on people, much more inviting than the near. The other one that I'm not enamored with, I call the presidential. You've seen it. Yeah, the little jabby one. Apparently it started with JFK, and Clinton was so enamored with JFK that he modeled lots of JFK's behaviors, some better than others. We could have that discussion too, and he picked up the whatever. Now, when Bush did it, he used both hands. If you ever see any of his old videos, sort of like the pouty child is what it makes me think of. Right, so whatever, but not a strong gesture. You want hands visible. It harkens back to when hidden hands could mean hidden weapons. And also, if my hands are back here, look what it does to my shoulders, sort of the Groucho, as I call it. And the other thing is, when the gesture finally comes, and men are more likely to do this than women, it's the freed bird. Yeah. If you're seated, you want hands visible on the table or the desk. Not like this, because then rounds the shoulders. And you've seen people who gesture with their thumbs. Not another way to, so fewer, bigger is my general mantra on gestures. And there are now data that show that when we gesture, it not only helps our audience remember, it helps us articulate the idea. So I've seen video of blind children talking to other blind children. They can't see, they know their audience can't see, but they gesture anyway. So it's kind of round, and there's something in the gesture that helps the articulation of the idea. Now, I know this to be true because I'm one of those crazy people. You've seen us. Some of you may even be us. What do? We're on our mobile. We're giving directions to someone miles away. We're gesturing. So you go 3 blocks, you turn left, right? You've seen us doing this stuff, clearly not for the person we're talking to, clearly to help us articulate the idea. So gestures indeed can be helpful. What else about the visual? In general, the darker the color you wear, the more powerful you are seen to be. The darker the color, the more powerful you are seen to be. Now, go in audience, you need to think. You've got a busload of school kids, maybe power isn't what you're after. Maybe it is. One of the things that they do at MFA Boston, which I love, is rather than telling the young kids what they can't do, they tell them what they can do. You can talk softly. You can walk and not run. Yes? So it's all of what the behaviors you can do are a good idea there. What else about the visual? You don't want earrings that move. It's not the size of the earring, it's the movement. When I was at MFA Boston for one of my early times, there was a man who was working there who had one very long earring. And I suggested to him, because it swung every time he turned his head, that maybe for his presentation, he might want to take it off. And he said, Barbara, you don't understand. I never take it off. I sleep with it, I shower with it, I swim with it. And I said, that's great. That's your trademark. Far be it for me to make you take it off. He saw the video. You know, maybe I could just take it off for my next presentation. So again, it's not the earring, it's the movement. You want hair off of your face if you can. I have bangs. I try and get them off of my face when I present because it opens it up, and a lot of communication is in this part. Glasses. The most recent study I could find on glasses said it still makes us look more intelligent. Not a bad thing. The only thing that audiences dislike is if they're constantly on and off and on and off and on and off, it gets to be a distraction. So at a certain age, I always tell audiences you have to decide to see your notes or see the audience. And if you have transition lenses and you use PowerPoint a lot, be careful. If you're standing near a slide, there's a lot of light and your eyes will go dark. And the audience will see the dark, won't see your eyes. So I don't get transition lenses because I often do use PowerPoint. And speaking of PowerPoint, one of the things that I didn't talk about is, well, I didn't talk much about PowerPoint. You always want to start without a slide lit. Even if you have a sign as people are coming, a slide as people are coming in, before you start, I would darken it. Why? Because the slide will always be better lit, more colorful, and more interesting than I am. So why set up visual competition? And that sort of first slide doesn't tell them much anyway. Now, I always carry my own remote because some remotes do not have a blanking function on them. Mine does, so I can blank it and then I can bring it back up. However, if you don't have a remote and you're still doing the thing from the lectern and you want to blank a slide, there is another way. It will work only if you are in PowerPoint or Keynote. PowerPoint or Keynote, if you are in the slide show, you can hit the letter B. It will blank the slide. You'll get black slide. It's a toggle. You can hit it, it will bring back the slide. If you think your audience is falling asleep, you can hit the W. It will white out, so the room will be filled with light. Yeah? And again, it's a toggle, bring it back. Now here I want you to learn from my mistakes. What was my mistake? So I mentioned earlier I had the wonderful opportunity to speak at Chanel in Paris, which was a great opportunity, except what do you wear? I figured black, right? Black would be fine. It was great. And they took me to the cafeteria at lunchtime. Every woman was in black, so I played it right. But it was this fabulous cafeteria, and the women don't eat, but that's a whole other story. Okay, welcome to Chanel. Okay, so I have the global legal team at Chanel, lawyers, about 150 from all over the world because Chanel is in so many different countries. And I want to blank the slide, so I hit the letter B, and instead of a blackout, I got a whiteout. I'm going, that's never happened before. I tried again, same thing happens. Some of you are onto this. From the back, someone yells out, hit the N. Blanc and noir, it hit me. He didn't even have to say it. I learned French, right? So if you're in another country, and I know many of you travel, when I first started working at MFA Boston, I found out what a registrar does, because at a university, the registrar does something very different. So I know that many of you travel a lot. So check if you're using PowerPoint to make sure that you know what will happen if you hit one of those letters. However, it is handy, and sometimes I want the attention on me and not on the slide. Anything else about the visual, please? I don't understand what you mean by toggle. Oh, it'll hit, if I hit it, it'll bring it right back. It's just an on-off switch, sort of. That's what I mean. Thank you for the clarification. That's what I mean. A toggle switch is one that's basically on-off. Please. Right. Well, okay, I don't have a lectern here, but let's pretend. So first of all, the problem, well, let me come down, then we don't have to pretend. Okay, the problem with lecterns is they're made for average height people, whoever they are. And I am now taller than most women because I've got on a small heel. I don't wear high heels, and I'm above average in height. So for many women, you're going to look like a talking head. Right? Or shorter men. I don't mean to stereotype here, but in terms of height, you can look like a talking head. Even at that height, I'm much bigger over here. If I have notes, I can turn them this way. I just don't want them behind me, because then you see this. But if they're up here, I can glance down on them if it's not a manuscript. If it is a manuscript, there is a wonderful chapter in a book that I would recommend. And the book itself, we could have a discussion about, maybe not the best book, but it's a great chapter. The book is called there's a new version out, The New Articulate Executive. The New Articulate Executive, and the author's name is Granville Toogood. That's his name. People who know him call him Granny Toogood. Toogood, as it sounds. And the chapter is how to deliver from a manuscript like a pro. Now, I'm going to tell you some things that are not in there that'll be helpful in addition. Number one, I know we're all careful about being green and saving paper. However, use recycled paper if you want to, but do not print all the way down on the page, because the further down on the page, the more top of head we're going to get. If I only go maybe 2/3 of the way down, I can look down and not have to look all the way down. So depending on how large the font is, and the chapter will talk about the size and how it should be printed out. So don't go all the way down. If you are uncomfortable, you don't need to turn pages. You can slide them. But if you're uncomfortable turning pages, one of our 2 congressional representatives in Rhode Island is quadriplegic, and I've coached Jim for many years, and he has very limited range of motion in his hands. So with Jim, what we did was we took his speeches and put them in an old loose-leaf notebook with plasticine sheets. And so they're easier to turn than sheets of paper, and then when you turn it, you've got 2 pages. So you don't have to do it as often. You can do it half as often. And I would always suggest numbering the pages, because I cannot tell you the number of people who've dropped manuscripts and then, right. So I number in all 4 corners, and I think Too Good might talk about that as well. I also orchestrate my presentation as if it's an orchestral score. What do I mean by that? I mark it all up. Because I think the thing that's hardest for most of us is I'm afraid to look up, because I'm afraid I won't find my place if I look down. So what I do is, and we've all heard speakers who get to the end of the line, but it's not the end of the sentence, yeah? So they pause in weird places. So you want to break it. I use one diagonal line for a short pause, a double for a longer pause. I put keywords that I want emphasized in red, or I know that if I look up, I'm looking back down for the green circle. So I use crayons or colored pencils, and they're very helpful in making it sound right. Many presentations where people read manuscripts are papers that are meant to be read and not meant to be heard. And I think we've all been to those presentations. In general, short sentences have more vocal punch. It's not about correct grammar. It's about making clear declarative sentences. And so I again go back to President Reagan with Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Not tear down the wall, so subsequently, and then thereafter, and heretofore, and then, right? Simple declarative sentences, or as my husband so often says, subject, verb, object, stop. Subject, verb, object, stop. That's hard, because they're elegant sentences many of you craft, and I've read a good number of them, and they're lovely. Again, meant to be read, not necessarily meant to be heard. What Too Good is so good at, and I'll get to you in just one second, is, and this takes about 2 weeks of practice, and it is so valuable. My students have now learned it, and they are pros, is most of us do down, up, down. He has you practice up, down, up, and it makes all the difference in the world, because I'm up much more than I'm down. There's a hand back there, please. Mm-hmm. I found it very difficult to smile while I'm talking, and I wanted to know if you have any tips for that. Yeah, I think it's important most to smile at the beginning of an interview and to say something warm and inviting at the beginning. I'm not someone who can necessarily smile on cue. If you've seen my photos, you would know that. So what I do is I think of someone I love, or I plan, if I'm especially anxious about a presentation, I plan something wonderful to do at the other side of it so that I'm thinking about that, and that allows for a natural smile. I think sometimes women especially the smile gets stuck. There's one woman newscaster in Providence, and another car bombing today, and she's grinning. It's macabre. It's very, so I think we need to smile. Maybe if somebody asks us a question, to start with a smile if it's hard for us to keep going with it. The 2 things I write at the beginning of all of my manuscripts, one is smile, I'm not much of a smiley girl, and the other one is slow down, because I know I start getting faster and faster. One of the ways I counterbalance that, you may have noticed, is I use pauses, and I also increase redundancy. Other questions? What else, please?
Just going back to the use of PowerPoint, a professor taught me once that you should never leave the same slide up for more than 2 minutes because people turn off. Do you have any feelings?
If you're still talking about it, then it's fine. If I'm showing you the detail in a painting, but no, that's why I blank the slide. Because if I'm not on it and I'm talking about something else, it's a visual distraction, if not competition. Yeah.
So not necessarily 2 minutes, just if you're not talking about it.
If you're not talking about it. It could be 1 minute and then I'm done. And then the other thing is there's a dramatic way to use slides. And on the next slide, what I want you to notice is click, and then it comes up, rather than change the slide. And what we can see here is, it's a difference in, there's an elegance in the dance of how you use the slides, for sure. Please.
This may be something you'll get to later, but I wondered if there were things that you would want anyone making an acquisitions proposal to keep in the forefront of their mind in terms of that kind of presentation.
Yeah, so what to do in terms of an acquisition proposal, if you can have a what's in it for me. We already have several works by this artist in the collection. This would complete the blah, blah, blah. This would make us the blah, 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 blah. This would add to it in this particular way. So always think about what it's going to do rather than only how lovely the piece of art might be. And that seems to be what's most successful. Please.
What would you suggest doing if all of a sudden you realize you're going to blank out on something, not be able to complete the sentence, or you, in talking, lose your train of thought?
Okay, did everyone hear that? What happens when you lose your train of thought? So, subterfuge, or what Aristotle would talk about as obfuscation. You know, throw everything up in the air and forget, and hope that everyone forgets. No, here's what I would do. Sometimes I take a drink, and no one would say, did you see her? She drank 3 times, right? So it buys me a little bit of time to reset. I can ask you, are there any questions so far? Turn it off of me and onto you, right? And then that usually allows me enough time. And then the other thing is that old adage that the perfect is the enemy of the good. Sometimes I'm so careful that I want to remember to put everything in, but it doesn't matter because you all are going to forget between 65 and 80% anyway. So just buy yourself some space there and know that it's okay. If it's a small group and they know you, you can use humor sometimes. Yeah. Please.
I doubt I'm the only person who has special trouble speaking to cameras, but I can't relate to them.
Okay, so here's my trick. Here's what I do. If I have a camera person, I have someone that I care about, preferably behind the camera person, and I talk to them. And it's so interesting because my mother-in-law once said, were Cliff and your daughter there because it looked like you were talking to them because you seemed so comfortable? And I was indeed. I was indeed. Please.
As most museums, our museum has a lecture series. So I've heard a zillion of these scholarly lectures, and so I watched a lot of different speakers, and there's the speaker that has a PowerPoint and talks, and they have notes, but then I hate the ones that just read it.
Yes.
Straight. So how do you?
You can't read it. I mean, that's it. What I talk about sometimes is the difference between a thin deck and a fat deck. So the thin deck is what I show. The fat deck may be a send ahead or leave behind or here are the notes. Yeah, I don't want to present everything. And 10 points are too many. You have to, when I was working on my dissertation, we would go around. We had a dissertation support group, right? And we go around every week. What have you done? What have you done? What have you done? And when new people would come in, we'd say, what's your dissertation on? If it took them 5 minutes to explain, they were a year from finishing. If they could do it in a sentence, they were done. Yeah? So it takes that long to refine, and give us the essence. But if I said to you, I can do the whole presentation, or I can give you a précis, or just the most important parts, most of you are going to say, just give me the most important parts. So you don't have to overdo. And those lists. If I had written out 60% of the impact of any presentation is based on the visual medium, You wouldn't remember it. When I use slides, I have a pie chart for 60, 30, and 10. And that's so much easier. We remember things visually. So if I say 9/11 or Hurricane Katrina, we get pictures. We don't get lists of points. We don't get data. We get pictures. Other questions, please. Yeah, sure. So I would say it goes to goal and audience. The one thing I would say about bar stools is sometimes it's hard to know what to do with your legs. If you can't reach, they dangle, and it's a little uncomfortable for some of us, perhaps. But if you want to portray that this is the informal side, that you're getting a glimpse of behind the exhibition or whatever it is, you might want to stage it in a more informal way. I find that it's harder to have good posture on a couch than it is on a straight, upright chair. But that may not be what you're after. I saw a great Q&A with Bill Gates once in person where he was on a couch and it was much less formal because he's not a formal guy. And it would have seemed very strange to have him do a more formal presentation. Let's go to the verbal. I said that there are ums and uhs, and there are 4 reasons to get rid of them. The first reason is, how are we doing on time, that they are distracting. And I can't speak for anyone here, but I do know for me it was my college chem professor who ummed so often we took turns counting. Bad strategy, we never learned the chemistry. We found that out on our first chem exam. Number 2, there are studies that say that they make us seem less knowledgeable. What year was this painting painted in? Don't really know, huh? Number 3, perhaps more pernicious, it can make us seem less trustworthy. And that's important, that it leaches our trustworthiness. Doctor, what are my most recent test results? That bad, huh? Mom, Dad, did you use drugs in college? You're gonna tell me, right? And there are studies that say even 10 ums in a presentation can leach trustworthiness. Now, I'm not calling attention to anyone here, but there were several of you who started your question with as sort of a warm-up. And when my students do that, the whole class comes in with but sometimes they can't get the question out. So find out, if you can record yourself where the ums happen. Are they at the beginning? Is it a warming up? Usually they're between ideas rather than within them. And the 4th reason to get rid of them is we live increasingly in an internationally shrinking world. We have visitors to the museums from all over the world. Is there anyone here of Turkish descent? I usually see the response by now. Well, long story short, is the Turkish word for female genitalia. And not the polite term either, but we'll leave it at that. So when the U.S. used to send Peace Corps volunteers to Turkey, they made up an alternate word so they wouldn't use the dreaded word. But that's rather like the methadone heroin swap. Yeah, we'll give you the substitute, but we won't give you. So if you are an ummer, pause. It will make you seem wise and well considered. And this goes back to the question that was asked before, what if you have that pause? If you video it, you'll see that the pause seems much longer to you than it does to your audience, and that there is power in the pause. It's another way to take up space. So it's okay to pause. Audiences take their cue from us. If I pause and I'm fine, you're fine. If I pause and I'm not fine, then you're not fine either. So it's learning to hold the pause in a way. Another thing that sometimes my especially younger women students do, and male students as well, is that rising intonation at the end of their sentences. Makes everything sound like they're so uncertain. They never have sentences that end declaratively. They're always looking for that approval. So if you have a rising intonation, I see this the first day of class, what's your name? Jim Jones, John Smith, Barbara Tannenbaum. Sort of, is that all right with you? If not, I'll change it. Yeah? You laugh, my husband's family is still waiting. There's always one, right? Okay, where are you from? Providence, Rhode Island? Maybe you've heard of Rhode Island? Yeah? So if you have a rising intonation, 2 ways of thinking about it, 2 antidotes. Number 1, think exclamation point rather than question mark. Providence, Rhode Island. And the other one, and here I truly hope I don't offend anyone. I'm not thinking of it in a sacrilegious way. I think, my name is Barbara Tannenbaum, and then I say to myself so no one can hear it, damn it, gives it the right vocal emphasis. Where are you from? Providence, Rhode Island, right? And my former students come up to me and they want to make sure that I remember that they remember. You don't remember me, but my name is Jim Smith, damn it, and they say it out loud. Now, I had one male student who used to have that rising intonation whenever he said his name. His name was Kurt. And he graduated, since they were all seniors. He was working in the governor's office. I said, hi, Kurt, how are you doing? He said, I'm doing great, Barbara. I have to tell you, I finally learned how to say my name without going up at the end. I said, Kurt, that's great. He said, no, let me tell you how I did it. And I said, Kurt, it doesn't even matter. I'm just so proud of you. And he said, no, let me tell you. Oh, okay, fine, tell me. So I could never make this up. He says, before he says his own name out loud, when someone says, what's your name, or he introduces himself, he says to himself, so no one can hear it, my name is Barbara Tannenbaum. Then he says his own name out loud. So if it's of help, please take the name, use it in whatever way you might. There are key words I want you to take out of your vocabulary if you have them. And sometimes they sneak in, and so the easiest way is to start editing them if you use them in email, although many of us wouldn't use them in email and do use them in speaking. The first, you know, or my parents broke me of that one early on when they would say, no, we don't know. And if we do know, why are you telling us? Made me crazy, grateful now. JUST is a word that I allow as a time reference. I just came from lunch is fine. Any other time, it just, I just, or my least favorite, I just think. Well, then it's not important. I tell my pals who are running for office, and I've done a lot of political work, would you vote for someone who says, I think I have a plan for education? I believe I have a plan for education? I hope I have a plan? I have a plan. Plans change. Some succeed, some fail. Don't hedge. Kinda, sorta. Never add authority or power. To be honest. That one scares me. I thought you were being honest. If this is the honest part, what's the rest? Honestly, you could say candidly, perhaps, if you wanted to reveal something. Yeah. Others that you want to add to the list. I'm sure that there are many. Please. Like? Yes. So he went like this, she went like. Absolutely. I hear that all the time. Yes. Yes. It is all the time. I work a lot in the technology field, so I work for Google and also for Microsoft. And several years ago, the New York Times did an article on the use of so at Microsoft because it was so frequent. And I'm not talking about using it within the sentence, you're right. Everything starts with, even the presentation, so let's get started. What? Yeah, thank you. There was another hand. I've hallucinated it, yeah.
People tell me that I often say, in fact.
Okay, in fact.
And I can't tell if it's good or bad.
Well, we presume if you're giving a lecture that it is filled with facts, so maybe we don't need that. Actually and basically are two others that don't tell me much. Often overused. Any others that you'd like to add to the list? I'm going to add three more. Very, really pretty as modifiers. Weak modifiers. Someone said the other day, this is pretty important. Important is strong, pretty takes the power from it. But what about really and very? This is really important. This is really, really important. Two things. Number one, I don't know your scale. You come back tomorrow and say this is important, but is it really, really important? But number two, the vocal emphasis then is on the weak word rather than the strong word. This is really important, emphasis on really. Better. Slow down, pause, make eye contact, gesture. This is important, has more weight. Or use a stronger word. This is critical. Critical is like unique, is like pregnant. You are or you aren't. There are no degrees. I wish I had a dime for every time someone said, really unique, kind of unique, almost unique. No, it is or it isn't. Someone said the other day, this is really critical. I thought, I died twice? What is that? The language has become so devalued that we feel as if we need to boost it with these little things. Just, very, really, get rid of them. Use stronger language. Yes. Yes.
Places that were formerly authorities
I know.
for correct basic grammar.
Yes.
How does one deal with that when one is with a colleague, not necessarily a younger colleague, who is using it incorrectly? How does one
Correct them.
correct?
So the way that I put it is goal and audience. That this may sound fine to you. You may someday be in front of an audience where it's going to matter to somebody else. Because my students at Brown, seniors, do not understand the difference between a subject and an object. I know I sound like I am forever old, but diagramming sentences was the best thing I ever learned to do because they have I, me randomly used, it seems. Absolutely. And they have, honest to God, they have argued with me. I know you're right, Barbara, but it sounds wrong. When you say it the right way, it sounds better to use it the wrong way. So what do I say? I say, okay, sounds better to you. You may someday be in a job interview. You may someday be on radio, although apparently radio is slipping now too. Yeah? And someone may care. No one will ever care if you do it the right way. Someone may care if you do it the wrong way. So I'm working with someone now, not Buddy, who is going to run for mayor of Providence. And he had to learn the rule between object and subject. I said, do you know the rule? He said, oh, there's a rule? So not too hard. Okay, anything else, please? Uh-huh.
And you have no clue how to answer it. And, you know, I don't know, and here I hear myself saying, what is really the polite response to that? Because usually I'll say, well, I'll have to look up that answer or something, and I'll get back to you.
That's fine. Rather than I don't know, which is honest, it's I'll find out. Makes it sound a lot more positive. Yes? That's a great question. I'll find out. I've often wondered about something similar. So let's talk about answering questions. Number one, listen carefully to the question. Sometimes we do what I call hear through the fear. We know where the weakness is, and sometimes someone asks a question that's not that hostile, but we hear it as more hostile. The age-old example of this is the kid who says to his or her parents, where did I come from? And the parents roll their eyes and they do the birds and the bees and the sperm and the egg and the donor and the surrogate, whatever it is. And the kid goes, no, Johnny's from Philadelphia. Where was I from, right? So sometimes we overhear the question. Number two, if appropriate, repeat the question, which is why I asked if you could all hear the questions. Because I think we've all been to presentations where the speaker's halfway through the answer and we're still wondering, what was the question? So, and it also, sometimes if I'm repeating the question, someone will say, no, that's not what I'm asking at all. It keeps me from going too far down the wrong route. If asked for facts, be as brief and direct as possible. Nothing will be better. We all probably had times when we had essay questions in college or graduate school, and when we didn't know the answer, those were the longest, in hopes to throw out everything we knew to get partial credit. Audiences are on to this. So no one's asked me so far, okay, 60, 30, 10, what is it over the phone? On the phone, it's 75% vocal tone, 25% message. Next question. If you're asked for an opinion, give the opinion first, then support it with data. So headline first. I had one guy running for governor. Well, what do you think about the so-and-so proposal? Well, when you think about the people who put together, you think of the current economic forecast, so I guess you could say I support it. I support it. Here's why. So headline first. If you don't know the answer, one of the things that you can do, I call the teacher technique. That's an interesting question. What do the rest of you think? Don't say I know, don't say I don't know. Sometimes someone else might know. I can define it outside of my sphere of expertise. Yeah? I am the curator for textiles, and that is an interesting question. I'd be glad to get one of our painting curators involved in looking for whatever. And that's fine. We can't know everything about everything. I would rather someone be honest with me about where those limits are than tell me something that I later find out is wrong. Yeah.
Can we just go back to use it to the telephone
Mm-hmm.
percentages for a second? Because very often somebody calls and the answer is no, it's definitely no, but we're very nice, and that's, being a curator and being diplomatic. What is a good strategy to communicate the no, but be nice and not make them think it's a maybe? It happens to me a lot where somebody wants to show something at the museum, and they can't believe that there's really no open exhibition slots till 2017 because I said it politely.
Uh-huh. So some of it is vocal tone, and I too wish there were more open spots, but there aren't, and I cannot do that for you.
I cannot do that.
Yeah. If they hear a not, sometimes that's the thing, yeah. Or no, I'm not going to be able to do that. With our current restrictions, whatever it is, we're unable to do that. Yeah, just be clear. I mean, think about how you'd want to hear it. When I work with doctors on how to tell people hard news, right, which is harder than saying you can't do the exhibition to give someone a terminal diagnosis, the doctors all would say to me, we have no idea how to do this. I say, okay, stop for a minute. You are now the patient. How do you want to hear a terminal diagnosis? And they have all kinds of ways that they want to suggest. Do it in private. Tell me to bring an advocate with me. Don't beat around the bush. Tell me that you'll partner with me no matter what happens, whatever. But don't, there could be and maybe, and of course, part of that is malpractice suits. Yeah.
I was just wondering how to handle a deliberately provocative question. I was talking about a tapestry after Picasso's Guernica and the history of Guernica. And the fellow stood up and said, Picasso was a communist, right? So I didn't quite know how.
I would just smile and say, we're not here today to talk about his political beliefs. I want you to look at what we can see. What do you see when you look at this piece? Right? Just turn it, yeah, you can restrict. We're not here to talk about. And if somebody, you've all heard the person who goes on and on and on. They say they have a question, but they want to give a speech. One of the ways that I do that is I interrupt in a kind way. I say, I'm not sure I understand what your question is. That almost always moves them to a question. I have had hostile questions. And I came across this just accidentally. I said, would you mind repeating your question? And it was fabulous the second time the venom was out. Well, what I was trying to say and it was perfect. Or if he says he's a communist, I think I hear your disapproval there. What are you trying to say about his art? Yeah, there's a woman named Cher Hite who came to speak at Brown, considered to be a feminist. She wrote a lot about women and sexuality. And she came out, large auditorium, and she's dressed in a black leather miniskirt and a faux or real leather leopard coat and bright red lipstick. And one of the feminists from Brown raises her hand and basically says, why are you dressed like that? Yeah. And so Cher was great. She just said, I think I hear a judgment behind that question. I think I hear that you're disappointed in what I'm wearing. She said, if I dress like a traditional feminist, some people critique me for that. If I don't, I get critiqued for that. I dress to please myself. Next question. It was so elegantly handled. It's not about you, it's about me. Right? Yes?
I just want your opinion on how long is too long in terms of answering an email.
Oh, I think that depends on who it is and what's necessary for timing. Yeah, I mean, you hear these studies that tell you only want to handle any bit of email or any other once, because otherwise you're wasting a lot of time by doing it, and then sometimes I forget to get back. So I try and do them fairly quickly, which means that some of people get emails in the middle of the night, because that's when I finally can sit down and do it. But again, sort of the golden rule, I would like to know and that kind of thing. But sometimes I press too hard for an answer, and I'm learning not to. Please.
Can you talk more about situations like this where some curators know each
Hi, I'm Barbara. I haven't met you yet. Where are you from?
Sandra Furman.
Hi, Sandra. Great. Buffalo. I went to school in Syracuse. That's not too far. How was your winter? Right? I mean, that's a silly question, but if you're near a piece of art, then you have lots to talk about here, yeah? But it's just be, or excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm so-and-so. It's okay. I mean, we like it when people want to meet us, generally. It's not a bad thing. Now, if you notice they're talking about something very serious, somebody's ill, and it's sort of hush-hush, then I would probably wait or find another group. Please. That's okay.
Challenges with any kind of public speaking, whether it's teaching or gallery talks, is I always run out of time to prepare. I never spend enough time preparing. Do you have any thoughts on prepping for talks?
Yeah, the most important thing is to practice saying it out loud, even if you don't do as much. Again, the level of detail that you all hold yourselves responsible for is huge, right? And the general public probably doesn't need that level of detail. So again, when I structure a talk, I think about what I want them to leave with. And if they remember one thing about this piece of art or this artist, what do I want it to be? And then I build the presentation around that to reinforce it. Because if I can remember one or two things, they will stay with me. I have been so fortunate in my life in so many ways, and also in my job, working at the MFA Boston, which is where I've worked most. I've heard world experts give me an art education when they practice their presentations, and I remember the stories. I remember the things that are visual. I remember Friedrich talking about how one painter did dioramas, right, and then painted those rather than nature, and how the trees look like broccoli. And now when I see his paintings, I see the broccoli trees. I remember a textile curator who told us that wedding dresses weren't white until about the Victorian era, is what I remember. Correct me if I'm wrong here. That in colonial days, women would wear a silver or navy or green gown, and they wear it the whole year that they were married to all of their important parties. So I remembered that because I could picture the color of the dresses and had this presumption overturned that wedding dresses must have been white long before that. Yeah. So those little details that help me visualize are the things that stay with me, not the dates. Yes, verbal practice. And if you can, practice in front of someone else. Because we think we're being clear, and we may not be. How do you get from there to there? And so that's useful for sure. Yes?
You've mentioned Reagan. He had professional speechwriters.
Mm-hmm.
Who would you cite who's a contemporary popular figure without speechwriters who is an effective public speaker that we should perhaps look to or listen for?
That's hard because most of the people who have wide audience have speech writers and coaches, because Clinton did a great job. And I think I was most impressed with Clinton when he spoke one night and the wrong speech was on the teleprompter. So he has to deliver, and there's the wrong speech going by. I was in awe of that. So I don't know whether someone else had written that other speech or not, but I thought that he was very skilled at that. There are some, I don't know, who, I'll ask you, yeah,
I have a suggestion.
please.
Paola Antonelli, who works at MoMA, she's an amazing
Great.
speaker. I have her down in Austin, and she has a TED Talk and a couple of things online that you can watch.
Excellent, thank you.
And it's interesting because it's sort of in our field. So. Stephen Colbert. Yes, she does.
Excellent,
I think ever.
excellent. Yes.
Is there a face-saving device for interrupting a speaker who goes way over their time when they're delivering a formal lecture?
Thank you so much for your wonderfully wise words. Just come in a gracious way and be confident. If you come in apologetic, it looks like you're doing something wrong, right? But if you think it's too long, probably other people in the audience do too. So we're counting on you. What I do ahead of time, if I'm moderating a panel, is I tell each of the panelists I'm going to be strict on time. Do not take it personally if I cut you off. I believe that 4 people on a panel max. I have moderated panels with 8 people on them. That's crazy. I mean, not my choice, but I didn't get to choose that. So I just tell them ahead of time, in order to be fair, fairness is a general quality that we would all agree to. I'm going to cut you off. Please don't take it personally. And sometimes I'll pass notes if I have to. Any other questions? How are we doing on time? We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Yeah.
I happen to be better off the cuff. If I get in my own head and I start thinking too much, are there any ways, I mean, I know preparing and speaking out loud is good,
Mm-hmm.
but what if you're one of those people if I prepare too much,
Yeah.
I think it affects my presentation?
Yeah, so when I practice with people, if they start, I have them start 3 or 4 different ways, just so they know that they can do it in 3 or 4 different ways. We're talking here about all manuscript, all off manuscript. What I'm going to suggest is ideally there can be a blend. So at some point in my manuscript, it might say, tell the story about the broccoli trees. So at that point, I tell the story, and then I go back to my manuscript. So I wouldn't script that, the story, so that it's a little bit different, much fresher, and it also breaks up the way that I'm doing the speaking. Very quickly, then, any other questions? Please.
I found that when I'm giving a prepared lecture and I have to go somewhere unfamiliar that I haven't been before, I often show up and it's less than ideal conditions. So the slides are over on one side, the computer's over somewhere else, and I never know if I should apologize for the fact that it's going to be really challenging for me to give a polished presentation in that circumstance or just freeze through it and do my best.
Yeah, I never let people know that there's a problem, because then people are always disappointed. Oh, gee, I wish I'd had it when it was different then, the setup. It's not going to be as good. If you can handle things with grace, and I have, and because I speak so often, I have had electricity go out. I have had, I mean, you name it, and it has happened to me. And I will never forget, I was doing a speech once, and it was a long table, and I was standing, and with one of my barber gestures, the whole pitcher of water and my notes are now on the ground. And to make things worse, I have written in fountain pen. So I can literally see my words swimming in front of me, yeah? So I pick them up, I literally have to shake them out, they're that wet, slap them down on the table and say, you know, after a start like this, the rest is going to be easy. And I heard everyone go, because if I'm angry, I'm really angry at me, but it sounds like I'm angry at you, and you're not going to get what you deserve. So I've learned that if I can handle things graciously, that the audience is relieved. If I can take control and move things around, then I should do that. And there is some evidence that men are more willing to move the mic to them, and women are more willing to strain to reach the mic. So take control of the physical surrounding if you can, and then don't apologize. I mean, if you've said something awful that you need to apologize for, certainly you should. And that apology should always be, I'm sorry, and very direct. Back there, and then we'll come over here.
Okay, so when I was getting my master's degree, my professors commented that they felt that my presentations were a little bit informal or more casual, and I was just wondering how important is it to retain some kind of personality when giving a talk, because I'm not so much of a very formal, rigid person, and I don't necessarily want to impart that on my audience.
Depends on goal and audience. Apparently for your professors you weren't formal enough. So for that audience you would need to be more formal. So
in terms of keeping your personality.
right, so here's the trick that I would offer you. Sometimes, clearly I have some political agendas. You've heard many of them, I think. I have found the more conservatively I dress, the more radical I can be in what I say and have it be accepted. So I'm willing to dress more conservatively to be more radical. So if I want to be informal, maybe I always have a blazer on the back of my door, because there are studies that say that what women wear matters more than what men wear in terms of getting respect and all of that. The study was done where they had men and women subjects, and they had 4 pictures. So the first pair was a man and a woman. They were both in suits, and the subjects were asked, who do you think is the manager? 60% thought the man was the manager, 40% thought the woman was the manager. We're not at 50-50, better than it used to be. When they were dressed casually, no one thought the woman was the manager. So it impacts us more than it does men. So I might think about that. Even if I'm in jeans, this will square my shoulders and make me look more formal, and I don't have to be as formal in what I say because of the power of the visual. I promised you.
Oh, I was just going to add to the,
Please.
when you were talking about dealing with the computer and the slides, that I think if you project anxiety as a speaker, the audience becomes very anxious.
Yes.
And that's just the worst.
Exactly, exactly. Most audiences, remember this, want us to succeed. You all came in here wanting to learn something this afternoon. You didn't come in here trying to think, oh, this is going to be wrong, and that's going to be wrong, and this is going to be wrong. Now, it happens a little bit more to me because I hold myself up as a public speaker and someone who teaches this. But most audiences want us to succeed. It's ours to lose. And if we seem fully present in the moment, and whoever we are, giving of ourselves in our most powerful way, and that doesn't necessarily have to be formal. My first year teaching at Brown, I said I was 22 years old. My seniors were my age. My Viet vets were older. I didn't wear slacks once. That's cold New England weather in the winter. And because I wanted to separate from the students, I called them, since they called me by my last name, I called them by their last names, again, to be more formal. And I did an evaluation halfway through that first semester. I said, let's not wait till the end of the semester and find out everything I did wrong. Tell me. So one of the very brave young men from the back raised his hand and said, well, we've been talking about this, and we like the class, and we like you. Do you think you could call us by our first names? And I realized at that moment I had no idea what his first name was. So I said, thank you for that comment, Mr. So-and-so, and everyone laughed, right? So I had to learn that I didn't have to be somebody that I wasn't. But in the beginning, that first course evaluation, one of the students wrote an evaluation and handed it to me because he didn't want it to be anonymous. And it said something I've always held on to. It said, Barbara is not the best teacher at Brown yet, but until then, her enthusiasm will more than carry her through. So whoever you are, whatever your style is, enthusiasm about the project will be important. Let me quickly review the 3 main points I want you to remember. Number 1, goal and audience. Speaking to your audience in values and beliefs that matter most to them. Trying to figure out if there's a what's in it for me, especially if it's one that you share. Number 2, 60, 30, 10, the power of the visual. Take up space is number 3, which is also part of the visual. Think about words that are powerful and words that take power away. Think about connecting with your audience. Last thing about slides is, and this is a trick that I've noticed, is your eyes will be where your feet are pointed. If your feet are pointed at the slide, then you will be talking to the slide. We've seen those presentations. They're horrible, right? So we're very lucky here. There's a monitor here. So I could look at the slides here without turning to the slide, or I can turn my computer so that I can see the slides that way, or I print out copies of my slides, which I always do. I have 2 ways that I print them out, 1 per page, but then I have ones that have whole sets of slides on each page, because for me, it's the continuity. I know what each slide says. I want to remember, because I don't always use the same order or the same slides, what the next slide is going to be. So I will stay around for a while afterwards. There are so many other things I would love to impart to you all sometimes. How do we establish credibility? When do we use emotion? What is the value of emotion? When do we use data? What's the value of data? And if you need to contact me, my email address is quite simple. It's Barbara, B-A-R-B-A-R-A, Streisand. We all spelled it with more letters. _ that's the Brown method. Tannenbaum, T-A-N-N-E-N-B-A-U-M @brown.edu. If I don't get back to you, email me again. Brown has a very specific spam filter that has filtered out my husband, which leads to some interesting discussions about whether he emailed or didn't. And I am often traveling, but I do care and want to help you, because you all help make the world a more beautiful place. And at a time when we're never certain, with terror abounding and with all kinds of crises at our front door, it's even more and more important to me and to everyone. I mean, I think the signs are there. Not only is this museum open now 7 days a week, the Met is open now 7 days a week as well. Give equal time to both of my clients there. And so there's proof now. I was shocked, and I'm sure many of you know that the Met is the #1 tourist destination in New York City. I think that says something wonderful about how visitors come to cities now and what they want to see. So anything I can do to help you, and for especially people who've heard me before, thanks for coming back.